And screen share this. All right. So, hi people who are joining us later. Okay. So, thanks for being here. A little bit of context. So, and I'm going to give you actually more context than what you wanted, and I'm going to try to be very good with my time here too. So, this actually started years ago. It has been something that's been on my mind for a long time. So, what some of you may or may not know, I mean, it really came to a head when I was going through my MBA program a few years ago. And I became obsessed. Hey, Barb! And if you're not here, Barb is being celebrated today with cake because of her 6 years of being a leader in the congregation, and especially as our coordinators, worship coordinators. But anyway, there you go. So this question, though, it started really coming to a head when I was doing my MBA, and I kept hearing over and over and over and over and over again, like, what is the value and what is the impact? What is the value and what is the impact for organization? What is the value? What is the impact? Because if it doesn't have value and if it doesn't have impact, well, one, if you're a for-profit organization, you're not going to sell anything, you're about business. And if you're a nonprofit, if you are not able to focus on your mission, and if people don't want it, then what good is it? And so this really became with this idea of value and impact. If you want to grab a chair, you can just kind of, there's some more out there, sorry. I became obsessed with this idea of like, what is value and what is impact that congregations have? And it wasn't, I mean, again, I have lived with 1 foot outside of the church and 1 foot inside of the church my entire life. Like I have a lot of people, a lot of friends, a lot of relatives who are not a part of organized religion in any way, shape, or form. And their stories are excellent. And so I get that. And when COVID hit, something really interesting happened. For all the bad stuff that happened, there was actually something, I would call it kind of good, because what it allowed people to do is that it forced everybody to stop. It was a mandatory timeout that said, hey, what you are doing, you can't do anymore, you have to take a break from it. And that actually is called spiritual practice. Being able to stop what you're doing, to step back, to allow yourself to look at your life. What is valuable? What is impactful? And be able then to reassess that. And then when COVID restrictions were finally over and people were able to kind of do the things that they were able to do before, across the country, people were making these decisions as far as like, I can't wait to go back and do this, and this, and this. And the authors were going, you know, we were doing these things, but you know what? We don't miss this at all. In fact, my life is a lot better now that I'm not doing it. And it's not. All organizations were impacted by this. All nonprofits were impacted by this. All churches were impacted by this. For some within the church, it was like, oh my God, I've missed my in-person community. Can we please get back to this? I love them. Even online, it's been great, but like, I love my church. I love my faith. I love the spirituality that comes from it. I get so much out of it. And other people were like, we've been dragging our kids to church for the last 10 years, and we stopped doing it for 2, and my God, our life is so much better. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So Bethlehem was impacted by that, just like every other church. The people that were impacted the most here was the demographic of families with children in elementary school. They were the biggest group of people that I saw change in patterns. So the question then became really forefront after COVID: what value and impact do we have? Because I will always say this to the day that I die: everybody will do the things in life that have value to them. If it is important for you, if it is valuable to you, if you can't see yourself not doing this, if life is incomplete without it, guess what? I know you'll find the time to do it. I know you'll find a way to do it. It's awesome. So the question that I've been asking is like, geez, is God going to tackle about congregational life? In particular, about the Bethlehem community. COVID was the one that really got it going as far as the major shifts that I saw. But this question has been on my mind for a long time. And I was able to do that then over the season of Lent. It was a very short time frame, but it was the time frame that I had. And I wanted to offer 40 days as a kind of a spiritual practice to be able to listen to everybody that wanted to have a conversation. Everybody who wanted to have one, I made time for it. And it was good. We did it a couple different ways. It was a general invitation to the congregation, and people self-selected and signed up and had conversations with me. People gave feedback on lines only, and that was fine because they didn't have the time. And then I also sent out about 40 targeted asks for individuals that I wanted to have a conversation with, who may not necessarily be motivated by a general large-scale announcement saying, hey, talk chat. So I had a number of those conversations, and I had a list of questions that I asked, really focusing big picture on this idea of what is the value, what is the impact of a hacker. That's where this conversation came from. That's why I wanted to do it. And there were two goals then that I wanted to get out of it. One goal was simply I wanted to hear people's stories, because you are all fascinating people. Everybody's story is interesting, and I like people. They're fascinating to me, and I wanted to get to know people and build that relationship. And so if nothing else happened, I was able to have good conversations, and I learned a lot from a lot of people about their personal lives. And as a pastor here, that was fantastic. Number two, the secondary goal was, if it was possible, I was hoping that if I began to hear consistently what are these areas of value and impact that keep coming up time and again, if that is happening across the board, well, that's where our focus is at. Like, we don't change who we are. We will always be a church. We are always a faith organization. We always are about making disciples of Jesus. But how we go about doing that and where that value is in the midst of that, if there are overlapping pieces to that, I want to know, because we can build on those. Because if it's valuable for a number of you, it's valuable to a lot of you. And that is one of the things I wanted to do. And there were actually overlapping pieces that I heard consistently. So let me just give you a rundown a little bit on what we did here. So again, overview. So again, the context in which Bethlehem carries out its mission is changing. What does it look like to be a church, a community that follows Jesus in a post-pandemic, post-Christian, secular age where a growing number of people are cynical of religious institutions on the national and local levels? Wow, that's the question, right? I mean, but seriously, that's our context. What does it mean to do ministry in this context? Let's be honest with where we are. That's where we are. So, and again, it led me to asking questions about impact and value. And I wanted to use these to develop. So here's my summary. And this is actually a little out of date. So during 40 days of Lent, there were over 30. I mean, I think right now it's actually right around 40. I averaged out about 40 conversations on impact and value that took place. This was, right now, it's about at 20 hours of conversation. I did this a while ago. This information's old. About 20 hours of conversation total with a handful of other people who submitted online. And the group was comprised of those who signed up on their own, those who were specifically asked, those who are and were connected to Bethlehem, as well as those who valued faith differently. And this one I think is kind of cool. So the blue is my faith is extremely important. Orange is my faith is somewhat important. Green is and. So there is, again, most of the people I talk to, yes, their faith is extremely important. But I want you to also know that I was looking for people to hear from who's like, you know, it kind of is, or not really. Because I think their voices are incredibly important to hear. Side note of this one. This one was also interesting. It tracks with national trends, but it's true of this place as well. The importance of one's faith life is not necessarily connected to church engagement. Huge on that one. Like, if you don't understand this one, I think you're going to miss something. You can say your faith is incredibly important, and it is, and you can tell me why it is, but that does not necessarily translate to you participating regularly in this place. It just doesn't. In the same way that your kids or grandkids might say, of course my faith is important to me. I was raised with it. Of course it has value to me. Well, do you go to a church? Well, no. Well, how does that work? I mean, for a lot of us, we equate going to church with faith is important, but that is not necessarily true. So this will be something to keep in mind as we go through this. So here we go, scrolling down. These are my card deck. And I'm going to read that. I will read it to you. I used, if there were overlapping things that people said from multiple sources that I was like, this is interesting. Pay attention to this. I kind of did posts on this. So while these are individuals, there were more than one, there were more than a few people who said something similar to this. So I'm just going to go through and read some of these. This one is probably my number one takeaway from this. After my daughter went to college in another town and then no longer lived in the area, I was back to going to church alone. And a lot of folks I knew had moved on to other areas with their lives also. My kids are no longer here. I have one more like this. I have a couple more like this. Personally, we're at a place where we have one left at home, and we are trying to figure out to what is next from us. We are disengaging from this stuff. Our kids aren't home anymore. Our kids are transitioning. We have no idea what to do. Like, how do we life? Not only how do we life, how are we going to be involved? And we'll get down to this in a second, but like, this is really important. Life transition moments came out really clear in these conversations, not in that there's clarity in them, but that there's not clarity in them. That's like, how do I figure this out? How do I move from doing life this way for so long to moving life to do life a different way? And what in the world can I do about church? Because my primary connection to church is no longer here. That was fascinating. Oh, come on, it just reloaded. What prevented me from engaging was not feeling a part of things, not knowing people. It's hard to get to know people in the church. For every conversation that I had where there was an affirmation about this is a fantastic community, and there were lots of those. Trust me, there were lots of those. There's also a significant number of people who struggle to find connection. So it is not easy to get pulled into BLC. I tried to get involved. It was not that people were not nice to me, but they did not need a friend. They already had a friend. It took me years to do that. This is important to know. It is not easy always to be in a community of this size. Communities of this size, they don't naturally form cohesive, tight-knit community. That has to be something that's really intentional on both sides of the equation. I worry about much in life. There's much brokenness. Where can we find an alternative? This is what church addresses at its best. This came out time and again. Talking about value, talking about impact. There is so much that's broken in life. There is an alternative that we can be a part of in a community like this, and that is a great thing. The message at Bethlehem has never been about guilt, fire, brimstone theology, but about forgiveness, being open, being welcome and loved. This approach is like a breath of fresh air. Again, that affirmation of this message. This will come back in a second, because I can tell you this. If their mission, if their sole purpose is numerical growth, this is bad for business. I am not kidding. It is far easier if you already fired and burned someplace. If the stakes are so high that your community cannot disengage with you because they'll go to hell or other bad things will happen, it is so much easier to have larger numbers where there is more restrictions and where in the church context, the theology is absolutely more fire and brimstone. Just saying. And again, that's been done many times, and there's many anecdotal and actually research pieces on that one. Rituals of healing make us unique. You don't have diversity elsewhere as you do in church. And while we may not have racial diversity, what we do have is diversity among every other category. You have age demographic diversity. I'm not aware of any organization that has birth through the end of life as a part of a community. That's unique. That is so incredibly unique. I'm also not aware of an organization that really had people on all sides of the socioeconomic ladder that gather together. We have people here who are literally just wondering how to make life work financially. And we have people here who literally don't have to worry about that at all for the rest of their life. And we have people everywhere in between. There is incredible diversity here, and we have different gifts as such. This is coming out in the conversation. I believe God's calling Bethlehem to be a place of refuge from the problems of daily life. Second, we're called to invite others to witness the grace and security we have with Jesus. Third, we need to somehow show people the importance of belonging to a faith organization, right? That's kind of the thing here. But again, more affirmations about this place being a place of refuge, being a place that talks about grace and the way of life that we have with Jesus. And again, a value in how do we share this with others in ways that make sense. There's a reputation in the community that makes us curious, place open to change. That's kind of cool. That came up many times. And of course, we can't have a conversation without I wish statements. I wish we had more families engaged in worship. I wish my husband would be more engaged. Yeah, I mean, and that's, that's a thing. And then that was it. So it was that engagement question too of like, I know people in my life who are not here, and that makes me sad. Number of different people talk about that. Okay. After 30 plus hours of conversation, 40 plus conversations, just within a tight time period of Lent, in the context of a post-pandemic, post-Christian, all the kind of things that we find ourselves in, this was with people who were open just to coming and people who were asked. All of this led, at least for me, to see three overlapping areas. These are my takeaways. So number one, and this is like a duh statement, children are the primary driver of parental engagement. I mean, it just is. And if you read the message today earlier, like that's, we are so busy, running our kids around everywhere, that if your kids are not, like here, no one's going to be here. And so what does that mean though? So and we already looked at this a little bit with our staff, and we'll be thinking more about this too. But again, it's since COVID, it's a refocusing on family involvement in worship and standalone events, and not in just like we want you here, but in ways that actually make a difference. Because here's the thing, the focus on faith formation as human wholeness and mental and emotional flourishing. It's not enough anymore to go, hey, why don't I send my kids to learn about Jonah and the whale? Well, that's a fascinating story, and we'll teach it to them, and it'll be a part of the faith formation curriculum. But if we are not talking about compassion and kindness and hope and love and forgiveness and wholeness and contentment and joy, there are other places where kids and your kids and your grandkids are getting all of the other kind of junk that our culture has from social media and definition for success, which really isn't great. We offer a counter voice to what is so often found in our culture. And I know a lot of people are thinking about that because they want their kids to be balanced people. We have a part to play in that. And by focusing on those aspects and not just, hey, Jonah and the whale is a fun story because sing a song about it, right? But actually like talking to parents about this, like your kids will develop faith and they will develop a way of seeing themselves in the world with or without the church. Here's the story that we have that they can incorporate into their own life that is actually good for their overall social, emotional, and spiritual health, of course. But it's something that we can be thinking about differently. So that was number one. Again, my kids are no longer here. I don't know if I have a place here anymore. Came across that more often than I thought I would. That was a surprise to me. Children are the primary driver for parental engagement. Number two, people are unclear of their role when their kids leave church. Absolutely unclear. They don't know how to do it. So a focus on life transition ministry. And this doesn't have to be just when your kids leave, your spouse dies, and all of a sudden you don't know how to go to church anymore. Like, it's not the same. It doesn't work right. We have a number of people who talk about that. The birth of a child. Like, I have kids and they're loud, and I don't know if we can come to church. I mean, it's all of those life transition moments that people find themselves in that's hard to navigate, that I think we can really do a better job of thinking about. And the third one is community connections, and that service and hospitality relationships. Absolutely essential to Bethlehem's vision, mission, values. It's in our mission and value statements, and it's absolutely clear from everybody that I've ever talked to in this congregation that at our core is community connections, hospitality, and relationships. That's who we are. And on this one, if we do this pretty well, and I would say we do it good. How do you move from good to great, though? I mean, I think there are ways of that. So for every person that said, I'm very welcome here, and of course we're welcome here, there was also, a significant portion that said, I'm struggling to fit in. I mean, I do. I sit alone, and nobody talked to me this morning. Everybody has their friend groups, and it's like, I don't know what to do about that. It's not just on staff, it's all of us as a congregation to make a place that is absolutely welcoming to all people. And that means going out of our way sometimes to make that happen. So it's being able to have also in our service work, more hands-on, more volunteer opportunities. We've experimented with that a lot this year. That has been good. I think there's ways to make that even better, to make that even more pronounced in the community. And so we're working on that piece as well. But here's the three takeaways, like from all these conversations. One, it's all about kids because they'll drive your engagement. And if we're not doing that well, which we are trying, we can do it better. We're making, again, headway into that. Number two, unclear about the role when their kids leave church or in any other time of life transition. And number three is moving from good to great on the community connections, service, hospitality, relationships. So if all of these conversations for 2023-24, so many stories of impact and value can be categorized as stories of healing. I would actually call them stories of healing. That is where all of the value and impact, all those stories that I heard, I would classify as stories of healing. That is a buzzword. That is hard to work with because, well, what does healing mean? And no, we're not talking about just physical healing. We're actually talking more than that. It is about wholeness. It is about a complete life. It is about being seen and heard. It is about being accepted and loved. It is finding a place. It is knowing your name. It is all those types of things. And as we pray for each and every week, we pray for people that they would find healing regardless of whether or not they can be cured. They're two different things. All the stories of impact and value across the board that I heard are stories of healing. It's support in times of need, addressing loneliness, grief, reframing, resetting, community building, etc. Anecdotally, in a post-pandemic polarized community, healing between nations, communities, families, and individuals, it's needed. We don't have healing in our world right now. We don't have healing in our communities right now. We are just fine yelling at each other, and it doesn't work for anybody. We have a different voice. So this focus will need to permeate kind of our ministries. And again, my quote from our Surgeon General too, like one of the biggest public health crises in the country is loneliness and isolation. It's happening across the country. It's most prevalent among young people, and it's a recipe for disaster. People are perpetually worried, pessimistic, and under mental distress. But we have something here
that counters that. So trying to work at this and being creative with our themes, because I mean, from a staffing perspective, we work really well with themes. From a congregational perspective, I think it's really good to have a focus that we're actually working and building on. So it's kind of in the works, but rephrase for a new perspective on wholeness, retold, reconnect, repair. So in a changing culture, how do we rephrase our faith for better understanding? So part of being a 21st century church is that our core stories are retold in different ways to capture people's imaginations and hearts. Our community is called to reconnect in ways that are fun, life-giving, and supportive, all while we repair that which is broken in our lives and our world. And so that would be what we would operate under for the ministry that we would try to do for this coming years. Like it's not just like one, this is like big work in progress here. But based on where the culture is at, based on where people are at, based on the overlapping the conversations of where people found value, this really is what we've come up with. And then as far as a worship schedule, like worship preaching kind of stuff, different focus areas that we would look at would be like, the area of like, how do we renew? How do we rediscover, rebirth, rejoice, repent, reconcile, revive? Our initial like brainstorming on this, like Chris Keeble came up with like, what about re? And I'm like, what? Like how do you make a story or a narrative around that? We were looking for words and phrases that were also not buzzwordy. Healing and wholeness are kind of buzzwordy, but rephrase the story of our faith, to retell it, to reconnect, to repair. And again, not just as a nice little saying, but this permeates kind of into everything that we do. And then finally, I want to share this with you because number one, children are primary driver for parental engagement. People are unclear when their kids leave church. It's always about kids. It's like, how do we get more kids here? How do we get more families here? How do we It's not easy. And I want people to I'm going to be straight up with people on this one. So I want to show you, there is so much research being done on the faith and religious life of individuals now. I mean, it happened for a while, but like now. Here's the most recent one coming out. I don't remember, this was, I don't remember where did I pull this from? So a survey on American life. Can't remember the source. Anyway, I have a link for this if you want to read it more. And if you want to come up later and look at this, you can. But here is, and I know it's small, I'm going to explain it to you. This is a graph depicting basically religiously unaffiliated people. So, and broken up by generations. So the silent generation within white evangelical Protestant or white mainline Protestant or black Protestant or white Catholic or Hispanic Catholic. I mean, that's all of these. These are the numbers of people who are, engaged with a church community. So like in the silent generation, 23% are white evangelical Protestant, 19% are white mainline Protestant, and so on and so forth. And only 9 are unaffiliated. Like that, and that means not engaged actively in a worshiping body or religious tradition. Take it up to baby boomers, 9 goes to 18 of unaffiliated. The other numbers start to decrease. Go to Gen X, goes from 18 to 25. Go from Gen X to millennials. I'm an old millennial. If you can call me a millennial, like I am on the very, very, very cusp of it. I am the last millennial, or the very earliest one, if there is. I'm also kind of Gen X-ish. 29% unaffiliated, and then you jump it up to Generation Z. Those are all of your kids and grandkids. 34% are unaffiliated. Unaffiliated is the fastest growing group in the country. Not surprising. Should not be surprising. It's out there. And meanwhile, here's what I find interesting, because a lot of people will be like, well, look at, there's so much engagement, involvement for like, white evangelical Protestants. It goes from 23 to 18 to 16 to 11 to 9. It's reversing. And when it comes to like white mainline Protestant, that's like us, it goes from 19 to 19 to 14 to 16 to 12. We're actually not losing even as fast as white evangelicals. I'm just saying there's a whole number of things for this, but young adults today have entirely different religious and social experiences than previous generations. The parents of millennials and Gen Zers did less to encourage regular participation in formal worship services and model religious behaviors in their children than the previous generations. Many childhood religious activities that were once common, such as saying grace, have become more of the exception than the norm. The comparison to previous generations require us to capture the big picture again. Here's the Institute sloping graph of religious identity stretching back to this top generation. Okay. So again, there is not a technical easy fix for that. Instead, to be able to focus once again on those pieces of value and impact, which has been impacting people for human history on stories of healing. And then trying to, like I said, incorporate into all of that. But that's what I know. That's the conversation that I had, fascinating conversation that I had. It mirrors a lot of what I hear on a larger church, but a lot of unique stuff about Bethlehem. This is a really solid, great place to be because there is a lot of passion for the people who are engaged about the work that actually matters in life. So I'm pausing. That was a lot. Woo, I'm happy to have a further conversation with anybody about this. But just in general, like 1 or 2 questions. Anybody or comments? I'm just curious. Does this make sense?
I'll make a comment. One of the biggest things we as older people can do is get to know a kid that they've never met. Look out here sometimes, see how many children, teenagers are sitting there alone. Sit down and say hi. How are you doing today? And it makes a world of difference. Kids, if you have the opportunity to go on a mission trip, you can meet kids that need an adult.
Thanks, Chuck. And my question, I guess, is does this make sense?
Yes.
And I'm looking at you, and as far as and I want to test this too, because you are the people who are here, because you're the choir, so to speak. What do you think about this? This makes sense. What do you think about this?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's kind of weird.
No idea how long this kind of we were from this for like a month.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's curious, even one of the biggest gifts that the baby boomers got from their parents,
Yeah.
silent generation, was recreation.
Yeah.
Recreation.
Right. And again, like each new generation, has to recreate and retell their stories. And we have to just be very aware of where that's at and what our core is at. Because again, we're not chasing something that we're not going to be who we're not. We are not going to try for the sake of getting people here to I don't know, become what we're not. And it doesn't work, by the way, too. Congregations that are really focused on the bells and whistles and hey, we have a laser light show and fog and people swing through the air. It's look at white evangelical engagement. It is dropping because there's nothing to substance to keep it there. Jerry, and then I gotta go.
I heard you say community is really important. The community is really important. And our young people are not choosing this community, then it seems to me that they are choosing some organized.
100%.
And that could be political, it could be whatever. Their ski trip,
Yeah.
but they're going to choose something.
Yep. And also, I would say this. Let me reiterate this. This does not mean faith is unimportant. You have to know this. Somebody who from Generation Z goes, I'm not gonna go to church, will also say, I think the story of Jesus is fascinating. I really respond well to the love and acceptance of all people. I mean, I want to follow this way of life and live it. That is not uncommon to hear.
So did you ask any kids any
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, I've had conversations with them. I mean, again, a lot of it is on a maturity level too. I've had conversations with people who were ex-church workers, who were part of congregations, who worked with them, who were not anymore. Like, it's been across the board, but anyway. I gotta run. I didn't get I mean, seriously, like, let me down sometime and I'm happy to explain this more, but I just wanted to test.